And welcome this evening. Thanks so much for tuning in to Livestream. My name is Colin Matthews. It's nice to have you here. You're welcome to say hello. Hi, Judith. Nice to see you here as well for this evening. So tonight's topic is how to move on with minimal residue. And what I love about this topic is it's something that comes up with a lot of the people that I work with. Either moving on from a job, moving on from a relationship, only just getting into moving on from the life that you're living. But certainly moving on has been a topic of exploration in the work that I do with people. And it's a really good topic to explore because we're constantly moving on. And why minimal residue? Well, when you move on, it can be this great event of new birth and growth and opportunity. But it can also be a letting things go or actually being held back by the past. And so we're trying to figure out how to move on with minimum residue. We've got Oscar here as well. Hi, Oscar. Nice to see you. As always, if you'd like to have a reading done during the show, you're welcome to send me your email and email me your name and your age, and then I'll do a reading for you live at the end of the show. So without further ado, let me pull up my mixed screen here, which is we're exploring how to move on with minimal residue. So now the first thing to consider is instead of using the word moving on, I actually prefer you using the word transitioning or even potentially evolving. And so what do I mean by that? Why would I say how to transition with minimal residue or how to evolve with minimal residue? Well, moving on to me references primarily the past. It is a connection to what once was. It's what you're moving on from. So what am I moving away from? What am I moving? You can be what am I moving into, but moving on to me indicates leaving. Whereas transitioning, instead that to me honors where you've come from. I'm transitioning from this, and what you're moving into. I'm transitioning into this. Evolving to me speaks a little more in terms of what you're moving into. I've evolved to the place to get to here. They can all be used interchangeably, but for myself, either transitioning or evolving are two terms that I personally prefer to use in this conversation. So how to transition with minimal residue. So there's two main components I want to focus on how to move on with minimal residue. The first one is honoring where you've come from. So when you go to move on, I honor where I've come from. The past is there to be honored. And then secondly, I am preparing for what I'm moving into. So I honor where I've come from and I'm prepared for what I'm moving into. Those are the two components in moving on. And so as we explore this conversation, to me, the first thing that I would like to explore is instead of thinking of things as good or bad or right or wrong and moving on, like, is it the right thing for me to move on? Is it the wrong thing? Is it good for me to move on? Is it bad for me to move on? And that can be in a relationship. Is it good for me to move on? Is it bad for me? Right, wrong, good, bad, those are very black and white terms, and I don't actually recommend looking at it that way. I would prefer to look at things as what are the energetic costs and what are the energetic benefits in transitioning. So there's always going to be a benefit and there's going to be a cost. I don't know if you've ever experienced this. You break up from a relationship and there's a feeling of freedom or ease that suddenly comes in the breaking up. And at first it's wonderful. There's a liberation, freedom. And then at the same time, unresolved things eventually will start to rear their head. So there's both a benefit and there's a cost. So instead of right or wrong, should I move, should I stay, should I go? What are the benefits? What are the costs? And that's the benefits and costs to yourself. And that's also the benefits and costs to the people or the world around you. If you want to be a pure narcissist, just focus on the first one. I just want to know what the benefits and costs are to myself. If you want to be self-sacrificing or a martyr, just focus on the benefits to everyone else. And if you want to be a well-rounded human being, I would encourage both. I want to attend to what would benefit me and what would also benefit the world around me. And transitioning does involve both those things. It's never just a selfish act. It's also an act that affects other people around you. So as you think about transitioning, whether it's from life, in your work, or in a relationship, or whatever it is you're transitioning from, I encourage you to think about yourself and the world around you and the implications. So there's two other main concepts I want to explore before we get into this conversation. The first one is, how can you maximize the energetic potential in transition? When we're making a transition, I would like to maximize the potential, the growth, the opportunity. And at the same time, I would like to minimize the residue. And now, why residue? Residue is like that stuff that sticks on your plates when you don't wash them very well. It's something from the past that carries over into the future. And anyone who has gone through the aging process, likely past the age of 30, will have started to notice that life presents residue. The burdens you've experienced, the challenges you've experienced, those start to build up. So as we transition, and truthfully, every breath is a transition, every day is a transition, but as you make a major transition, how do you minimize the residue or the leftover unresolved energetics from the thing you are leaving from or you're moving from, right? So how can we maximize and how can we minimize? And here's a really important thing that I've really noticed in my life, and that is that transitions are energetically potent events. That can be, like I said, for example, in a relationship, when you end and you feel a sense of freedom. When you finish a career, you may experience that. And you may also experience the opposite, a downward turn or a loss. And so I think of transitions as energetically potent events. And that's why when you're considering a significant transition, I think this is a really valuable conversation to explore. Okay, so the first thing to explore in a transition is, what is the direction of your energy? What do I mean by direction of your energy? And well, the simple one is, are you trying to get out of something or are you trying to get into something? Those are two very different propositions, getting out versus getting in. Getting out, oh, I can't take this anymore. I'm done with it. I've had enough. I just want to get out of this. I hate this job. I hate my boss. You know, that this person I'm in a relationship is always trouble. I want to get out of this. Versus, I'm ready to move on in my career. I'm looking to create something that really reflects who I am. This relationship has served me, but I feel like there is something that is a deeper connection as possible in my life. And that's what I would like to get into. And so the first thing when you're in a transition, alarm bells go off when you are getting out of something, and opportunity and our sense of ease or grace presents itself when you are getting into something. And so first thing to question, are you getting out or getting in? So let's explore getting out, getting in into a little bit more detail here. Okay, so what are the challenges of getting out of things? Well, the first one is that getting out can involve the energy of escape. What is escape? I got to get out of here. Like, I've had enough of this, and I've got to get out. And escaping, well, sometimes it's essential. If you're in a toxic situation that is not tenable to your life, like let's say that you've been held against your will, I'd say escaping is a very good energy. I don't mind if you get out of being held against your will. But in situations other than that, I don't know that escaping is a good energy, because escaping is tragic when I got to get out of here, but you don't take responsibility for how you may have gotten there. So that's a recipe for residue. When you escape a situation, like I hate this job, I'm out of here, I got to get out, instead of, oh, how did I end up in this job? What brought me to this place? How did I end up in this relationship? What is my role in here? If you don't take responsibility, escaping is a recipe for bringing more of that energy that got you into that situation into the next situation, hence residue. The other part is you don't actually honor the empowerment opportunity that exists when you honor the current situation that you are in. So part of the foundation of medical intuition is that all ailments are an offering of empowerment. And now what do I mean by that, an offering of empowerment? They offer us a way to be more connected to ourselves, to the depth of reality, to be able to stand in the depth of our being, in our truth. There's always an invitation in every single ailment in life. There's no such thing as an ailment. Even terminal ailments have an offering of empowerment. I'm not saying they're not tragic. I don't really believe in being sunny side up or trying to put a positive spin on things. That's not what I'm suggesting. I'm saying there's an offering of empowerment. Notice the word, it's an offering. It's not a requirement, it's an offering. You can take it or not. And so when you move to escape, you got into the situation you're in for some reason, and if you receive the empowerment opportunity, that will prevent you from recreating the same patterns over and over again. And in fact, if you have found that relationships, work, follow similar patterns, there's a good chance that you're not drawing or yoking the empowerment opportunity that exists in that circumstance. And so escaping, I don't recommend that. And the extreme of escape is when you move in towards disgust. Now, I put here vomiting or evacuating. If you think about evacuating, if you eat something poisonous to you, my hope is you will evacuate it quickly from your stomach. And that is an important reflex for poisonous things. But if it is not poisonous and you choose evacuating or disgust, I can't stand this person, I can't stand being here, you're using an energy that really should be reserved only for the most toxic situations. And the challenge with disgust is the foundation of dehumanizing circumstances. So if you feel disgusted in your circumstance, is it because it is truly toxic and a poison that you need to get rid of and be clear? Or is it that you're really struggling to make amends in that circumstance? And disgust seems like a way to do that. That's actually energetically, and this is another talk for another day, you're trying to turn the other into a scapegoat to justify a violent action. And that's what disgust is sort of a mechanism for, but it's not for our talk for tonight. So anyhow, I would just caution against when you experience disgust and escaping. And the other big part in getting out is getting out often involves blame. And what do I mean by that? It often involves blame. Well, when you get out, this person is ridiculous. This person is unrealistic. This person is cruel. Whatever it may be, there's some type of judgment towards them, and blame. And I'm not saying you shouldn't hold people to account, but when you say all of this is someone else's fault, and you don't hold space for how am I involved in the creation of this? You've defiled one of the fundamental principles of the second chakra, which we can get into in a future talk. But more importantly, you don't receive the empowerment potential that exists in you because you're trying to get out. And if you're blaming somebody, you're not taking responsibility for yourself. I'm not saying there's a difference between blame and holding someone to account. Blame is it is their fault. The role they played is accountability. The role I played is accountability. So just notice if you're doing that. That's it. Blame is a guaranteed residue because when you don't take responsibility of your part, residue follows you. Okay, so escaping can be beneficial. As I said, if you're in a toxic situation that does not serve, abusive relationship, cruel intentions held against your will, anything like that, it is okay to escape. I'm fine. Now, moving on, and I am moving on here instead of transitioning because I want to talk about moving on from where you are. Moving on can be beneficial when you've received the energetic potential that is inherent in the situation you are in. I've received what I need from my job. I feel like I've learned the lessons. I've grown to the best of my ability. This is no longer a growth opportunity other than the growth of perseverance or the growth of tolerance. Like if you've really received the gifts, then moving on is potentially a good thing. That's a tricky one to know if you've really actually received the gifts, but if you have, moving on can be a good one. And actually, sorry, let me just go back to that other screen here. The other thing that is valuable in terms of receiving the energetic potential in the circumstance is just because you're ready to move on doesn't mean divine timing is in your favor. Like it may be, I'm ready to move on and I might need a little bit of time before things will turn out the way that I would like. So there's a component of divine timing in moving on as well too, which we'll get to. And that's actually an empowerment potential to be able to be patient for divine timing to show up in your life so that the thing that you want to create is ripe for happening. You may want it now, but all the things required to make it come into fruition may not yet have been orchestrated. And so it's sometimes helpful to be able to wait. Okay. So what are some of the advantages of getting into what you're getting into? Well, first of all, it directs your energy towards where you are going. I'm getting out of this. I don't want this. I want this. I'm moving towards this. Would you like someone to be interested in a relationship with you because they can't stand the person that they were just with? Or would you like someone to be in a relationship with you because they like who you are? They're attracted to you. That's the getting into. It's what you're moving towards. That's a very empowering or potent energy when you are moving towards what you want. The other part too is getting into focuses on creation versus escaping. What do I want to create? Not what am I tired of doing? What do I want to create? What do I want to create? So once again, that aligns your energy in the potency of creation. Very powerful. The other thing too, and this is once again an important distinction in direction, it focuses on what you do want versus what you don't want. And that's a really interesting question to ask yourself. Do you know what you don't want more than what you do want? Oh, I don't want to go out tonight. No, I don't really want to do this thing. No, I don't want to see that movie. Well, what do you want? I'm not sure. When you get into something, you're focusing on what do I want? And that's a really great way to experience the energetic potential is when you focus on what you do want more than what you don't want. And getting into focuses more on what you do want. The challenges in getting in is that you can, I'm just reading my notes here. One of the most important parts in moving on is honoring where you've come from. And so when you focus on getting in, you can focus excessively on that. Oh, I'm so excited about my new job. When I graduated from university, I wanted to get into France. For whatever reason, I had it in my mind that if I lived in France, I would eat wonderful food. I'd live a more back to nature life and I'd be happier. And I was trying to get into France, but I wasn't honoring where I came from. I had no money saved. I had a degree in education, that was not transferable necessarily to France. I didn't really honor where I was coming from in order to what I was getting into. And this is the other problem with focusing excessively on getting into things. You can be based in fantasy. France for me was a fantasy. It was a pie in the sky. It was the aspirational thing that I wanted. It wasn't really what I wanted to get into, but by not having to say, hey, how do I build a foundation for myself? How do I create in this world in a way that's meaningful to me on where I am right now? Instead, I'm like, when I get here, then I'll be happy. So it's too much future, not enough past. And that's where fantasy can become a problem. Okay, so how can you maximize the energetic potential in your transition? How can you get the most in a transition? Make sure that you are yoking the energy in it. So the phrase that I like to use in this one is to ensure you have received the gems on offer in your present circumstance. If you try to get out of a relationship, like I'm done with this, did you receive all the gems? And what do I mean by gems? Well, the gems are the things that are there to serve you. One of the primary reasons we go into a relationship with anyone, whether it's work or another person, is that in that relationship, that brings things up. It creates opportunity for us to grow. You don't get those gems alone as in the same way that you do when you're with another person. And so one of the questions to ask yourself is, have I received the gems that is inherent in this situation? Oh, this person is really combative or really, confrontational, or this person doesn't, respect what I have to say. Well, what are the gems? The gem might be, oh, I need to learn how to stand up for myself. I need to learn how to speak my truth. I need to learn how to draw boundaries. I need to learn how to be more compassionate when someone else is suffering. Those are gems. And if you move on before you receive all the gems, you're going to have to repeat similar lessons in order to receive those gems. So you want to maximize by receiving the gems that exist in that relationship. The next one, and this is, to me, the foundation. It is the most essential part in maximizing. Take responsibility for your role in the creation of what you're doing. Now, I'm divorced, and it would be very easy. I'm divorced and remarried, but it'd be very easy for me in my divorce to say that person was like this, that person was like that. And really, if I look at things, while there's truth to some of the things about that person, there's also truths about me. How did I end up in that situation? How did I create this? This is a reflection of me, my creation. And so there's a role for me in that. And if you're not taking responsibility for your role in a situation, you are not maximizing the energetic potential in a transition. And so that's a really robust point to explore because there's many components to it. But just in terms of energetics, responsibility is key. How can you minimize the energetic loss in a transition and minimize the residue? And in a way, this is similar to maximizing the benefit, minimizing. You will maximize if you minimize, and you'll minimize if you maximize. So they are interrelated, but they're slightly different points. First one, avoid any patterns of blame and or resentment. If you can't get over a relationship, if you are constantly thinking about how horrible this person was and you can't see the suffering that drove them to do the things that they did, if you blame them, or another way to phrase that, if you insufficiently take responsibility for yourself, that will carry with you. And in fact, I'd say if you're experiencing the residue of blame or resentment towards an ex or a previous job, there's a good chance you have insufficiently taken responsibility. These are almost just universal energetic laws. I'm not saying it's always the case, but in my experience, that is the case. So if you're in a pattern of blame or resentment, caution, you're probably not going to receive the energetic potential in that moving on, or you're going to experience more residue. The next one, which we talked about earlier, is to honor where you have come from. And so the best example I think of this one, I love Marie Kondo. She's the space clearing woman. She has a Magic of Tidying Up, I believe, was her book. I can't remember the exact title of it, but Marie Kondo has a great practice where she's like, when you're done with your socks, they have holes in them. What do you do with them? To maximize residue, these socks are busted. They're cheap crap. Throw them out. The way to honor your socks, thank you, socks, for keeping my feet warm, for traveling with me through the world. You've done your job, and now I'm ready to let you go. I honor where you've come from. It may seem like a silly act, but doing that in all aspects. Thank you so much for this relationship that we are in. I really value what this has brought to me in my life. Even though there's challenges and there's a place I have pain, I also honor where you've come from. And that's a really helpful way to minimize residue. The other part too, and this is a really interesting one, is to develop self-compassion for the places where you weren't able to succeed. So anytime you go into a relationship with someone or something, you are creating something. You're giving birth to something, whether it's birth to the potential of a relationship, whether it's birth to a role in your work, you are birthing something. And when it doesn't turn out the way that you would like it to, there's a loss, and there's a need to mourn the loss in that. I don't think you can just move on, whatever, it doesn't matter. There's a need to connect to that loss or mourn the loss. And so when you have shown up in a way that has left you not necessarily feeling proud of how you have shown up, I would suggest that you develop compassion for why I didn't succeed. I did my best. I didn't have all the tools that I needed. I was really easily triggered and went off the handle. I thought this was that abandoning myself would support somebody else, but I see that it would not. And that's a way of honoring once again. And it's by developing compassion for the places that you didn't achieve what you hoped for in the place that you were in. Instead of being resentful towards yourself or judgmental towards yourself, compassionate towards yourself. That's a really helpful energy. Okay. The other one too, and this is true in all aspects, though it becomes even more apparent at end of life transitions, which is to consider the legacy that you want to leave. And what do I mean by that? Well, everything that you leave unresolved in your life will have to be picked up by somebody else. If you, let's say, have an absent parent, your papa was a Rolling Stone, there's a good chance that you experience the residue of him not taking responsibility for himself. It could be father, mother, boss, friend, whatever it may be. But when someone doesn't take responsibility for something, everyone else around them suffers. And so that is your legacy. And you want to consider, have I left unresolved things that it would be valuable for me to try to resolve in my lifetime so that I'm leaving a positive legacy? That can be considered an act of service. You can call it taking responsibility. Anytime you move on, if I've sold my business. If I had an employee that was a troublesome employee, well, chances are the next owner is going to have to deal with a troublesome employee. They could be just troublesome for me, but there could be something that is troublesome that I didn't attend to that the next owner has to deal with. I'm not saying that happened, but that's certainly a potential that exists. And so think about what you're leaving for others to pick up around you. And then the opposite way to look at that is every place that you are able to take responsibility, to clean up, to put things in order, the more delightful it is for everyone else around you. They don't have to pick up pieces. And legacy is really a gift. What am I gifting my family? What am I gifting the people who take over my business? What am I gifting my children? What am I gifting my community as I move on? And I like this one more than the first point in that it's like, I don't want to mess everything up for everybody. I want to leave a gift for everybody. And that's a nice way to think of a legacy when you're moving on. And so, a good example of that, when I was a kindergarten teacher and I decided I was going to open a yoga studio, part of me checked out. I wasn't concerned with my legacy of what I was leaving on. I would show up every day and I'd read the story and we'd do activities. And then one day a little girl in my class came up to me and she said, "Mr. Matthews, what are we doing today?" And I said, "Oh, it's Friday. We have library." And she said, No, we do library every Friday. What are we doing today?" And I said, "Well, we're going to, play outside and come and read a story and work on spelling." And she said, "Yeah, but we play outside and read a story and work on spelling every single day. What are we doing today?" And what she did in that instance was she held me to account for how I was leaving. I was already leaving before it was my time to leave. And this little 4-year-old looked at me and got right to my heart. And I set a commitment to myself. How do I leave so that I'm proud of the way I finish my work? How can the last day of school that I teach be my best day of teaching? And that's a really nice way to think about offering a gift to everyone around you versus, "I'm so done with this, I can't wait to get out." Because that actually energetically costs you. As I was checked out, I wouldn't say that I was full of delight. I wouldn't say that I was energized. I was kind of bummed out. And was it more work to show up skillfully in my role as a school teacher? Well, yeah, it was more work. Did it energetically benefit me? Unquestionably. Did it energetically benefit all those around me? Unquestionably. That's one that really does benefit everybody. So think about what you are leaving and can you leave more as a gift? Now, this is a really important one, especially end of life, but in all things, what do you do with things that you cannot change? Maybe you've passed your working years and you don't have the finance that you would hope for to leave what you'd like for the people in your family or to care for yourself. Or what if you've made mistakes that have caused people to abandon you in your life, right? These are things that it feels like you can no longer change. What do you do in those circumstances? And these, though painful situations, there's still an empowerment opportunity to be enlightened through them. So the first one, take responsibility for what you've created. Name and own it. Yeah, I just focused on myself. I didn't pay attention to the people around me, and I left a trail of disaster. Now, this is sometimes really hard to do because you can feel depressed with that realization. Wow, look what I've done. At the same time, taking a hard look at what you've done and being able to name it is the start to take responsibility and make changes. Right? So naming it, what you've done. This one is, to me, as important, almost more so than the first one, which is to find compassion for why you did what you did. I just focused on myself and I left a trail of disaster in my wake. Compassion, why did I leave a trail? Why did I focus just on myself? Oh, I thought if I focused on my needs that I'd somehow find happiness. But I see that focusing only on my needs didn't actually leave me happy. And I forgive myself for that. I see that didn't work and I see that it caused pain. And so instead of berating yourself for that or being hard on yourself, compassion is a healing energy. And if there are unresolved things in your work, in a relationship, man, I was such a jerk to that person. Why was I a jerk? I was scared. Oh, I didn't think that they'd listen. Whatever it may be. And I see that didn't work. Compassion is a very healing energy when there's something that you can no longer change in that circumstance. And this last one I really like, and I'll raise the next point too, because they're related, which is to send out a prayer when what you hope for can't, or that what you hope for can be created in the future. And so while you may not be able to take actionable steps to create the change that you want to see in the world, that doesn't mean you can't direct your energy. To me, a prayer is about directing your energy towards what you desire, even when you can't see a way for it to happen. And that is a legacy that you can leave. You could say, man, our world is a mess. We're being left with a legacy of environmental choices of generations before that are really painful. And I could see leaving life saying, I'm so glad I'm getting out of this life because I don't want to have to deal with this. Or you can leave it as a prayer. I hope that future generations find balance, find a way to sustainably live on this planet as a prayer. And that is a way to leave a positive legacy. So regardless of anything that you can't change, you can direct your energy in towards what you want to create. And that's a very enlightening, empowering energy. And I recommend that one for sure. And now this one is so interesting. And this one especially comes up in the ending of relationships. What do you do when those around you are blaming or not taking responsibility for their role in the creation? Number one, notice are they mirroring something in you? This person is always being mean to me. Are you always being mean to yourself? Oh, I am hard on myself. Oh, they are mirroring something in me, right? And so when someone is showing up and they're not taking responsibility or they're blaming, that's this model here. This is you, this is them. As you move together, if they stay here and you move towards your integrity and they're sitting there blaming in you, is there some way that you are mirroring? It's a mirror of what they're doing within themselves. And that's the opportunity that is presented when someone else is not taking responsibility. First of all, how am I like them? How is my behavior like them? That's a really interesting one. I've had a few couples that I've worked with where there has been one partner that has been unfaithful on the other one. And it's very easy to blame the cheating partner for their impropriety. And here's what I observe energetically. While the cheater checked out of the relationship to express himself somewhere else, the person who was cheated on had also checked out of the relationship, but they were in a pattern of resignation. So one dealt with the disconnect by taking action in a way that created harm, and one dealt with disconnection by withdrawing or diminishing in their presence in the relationship, which, while maybe doesn't create the same kind of overt harm, it does create harm. And so if someone has cheated on you, how have you checked out of the relationship yourself? That's a good way to look at how are you taking responsibility for yourself. The next one, and this is a really difficult one, but it's one that if you're interested in nonviolent communication, I highly recommend, which is to develop empathy or compassion as to why someone would do what they do. Why would that person cheat? And also to see that as an expression of suffering. Oh, any violent act is a tragic expression of an unmet need. There's no such thing as a violent act that truly meets your needs. It's an expression of suffering. And so if somebody is blaming you and calling you names, that's not an empowered human being. That's a suffering human being. And so can you see the suffering that's driving them? Can you see how their strategy of condemnation or disgust is actually keeping them out of their loving heart potential? And so this is a tricky one because it's easy to condone behavior when you empathize, but I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about being able to see the suffering that's driving the other person. And truth be told, that's a whole other live stream. We'll get into that another time, but it's an important point. And this to me is actually one of the greatest spiritual lessons I have learned in my entire journey. There are times in my life where I'm doing this where I'm pretty sure I'm in my integrity and this person's here. And I put all of my energy to say, hey man, can you please come and meet me? And they are unable to. What is it for me? I think I'm here, but I might actually be here. And so when you use someone else not being able to show up in responsibility as an opportunity to say, how can I have even more integrity? How can I behave even more honorably? How can I be even more proud of myself as I move towards this person? You will receive some of the great energetic potentials. This defines you. Sure, it's easy to do this when this is happening, but this so many do this. This is why Christ said when someone strikes your right cheek, offer them the left, because most people, when they're struck in the right cheek, will strike back in the same way. There'll be a mirror. But instead, when you come here and you say, oh, this person's here, how do I move even more into what would I like them to do? I'd like them to take more responsibility. How can I take more responsibility? And the person who really understood this principle was Gandhi. When Gandhi said, be the change that you want to see in the world, or something more precise than that, but that's the paraphrase of it. When Gandhi said, be the change you want to see in the world, he's saying, you're not here, you're here. So use this as an opportunity to move yourself closer to here. Be the change you want to see. Man, I wish this person would do this. How do I do that? That to me is one of the number one empowerment opportunities in having somebody who's not willing to take responsibility for themselves. And so you could think of yourself as a victim, or you could think of it as unfair, you can think of it as painful. And I understand those things, but if you see it as an opportunity to become even more into your integrity, you can do so. And that's been my experience. That's not a principle. I've experienced that. And I'm so grateful that my teachers offered me that lesson. And people like Gandhi had done the work to explore that. Okay, so there's 3 things that I still want to go over here, which is changing jobs or changing career, ending a relationship, or end of life. And if you have any questions, please feel free to put them up in the quotes below. I'm going to move back onto primarily this screen. And once again, if you want to write in, I haven't had anyone write in this evening, and maybe it's not a reading evening this evening, but you're welcome to. So I want to give some examples in changing a job. I have seen 2 very opposing situations. One, somebody knows they need to change, but they're too afraid to lose the security that their job presents, such that they're not willing to leave. And then the opposite side, someone realizes they're not happy where they are, and before making sure their affairs are in order, they up and leave, they quit, and they don't have the foundation that will help them to move forward in the right way. Now, I'll give you the best example in that. When I first opened my first yoga studio in 2003, I knew I wanted to do intuitive counseling for people and work as an intuitive healer. And the studio was not doing well. It was failing. And so I was thinking of getting out of the studio in order to pursue the healing work. And I'm so glad I didn't get out of the studio, because the lessons I learned in running the studio for the 16 years that I did has helped make me who I am. And if I had gotten out of it, I wouldn't have learned those lessons in that way. Now, if you'd said to me, hey, Colin, you are absolutely going to do intuitive healing, but it's going to take you 16 years to build a foundation, I would have been like, I don't want that. That's too much work. But that really was what helped me to create the foundation in order to build upon in that role in my life. And so for you, yes, you may be aware that you want to make a change. Is it time for you to make that change? Are there still lessons for you to learn in the work? Like, I still learned a lot when I realized I was approaching the end of my work. And then there's divine timing when things come together and it all makes sense. Or are you not transitioning because of fear of security? No doubt change is a risk. And so you may have to take a leap in order to shift. And if you resist that and you stay in the same job, that's a form of dying, right? That's not a form of living, that's a form of dying. That's resigning yourself to life. And I'm not saying that security is bad. I'm saying that if the needs for security outweigh the needs for life, that's dying. So that's something to consider in, should I transition a relationship? A job or career. Now, relationship, how do you move on? As I mentioned earlier, I've worked with some couples, and what I see is the people who struggled to get over the end of a relationship, in my experience, did not receive the gems that relationship had to offer. They wanted the other person to change more than they wanted to change within themselves. They wanted to blame the other person for the way they were showing up rather than take responsibility for themselves. And so they got out of the frying pan, but they got into the fire. And that's where that expression comes from. If you don't receive the gems, you get out of the frying pan, you get into the fire. And so how do I end the relationship? This doesn't serve me anymore. I feel at peace with this. Now, obviously, you end a relationship if it's toxic and you need to get out of there. That's a different story. And what I'm suggesting, if it's difficult to know, it's time to transition. Have you received the gems? Are you able to do so honoring? Like, I have a vision. I wish we taught young people to do this at the end of a relationship. So they're like, hey, I'm going to be in many relationships in my future life, and you experienced me in a way that's different than other people. The expression says we hurt the ones that we love. And so when you are in a relationship with somebody, you're likely going to be the best parts of yourself and the worst parts of yourself. And so that person you've been in a relationship with has a unique view of who you are. And so imagine each person in a relationship at the end of the relationship saying, hey, I realize that other people are going to experience my presence after this relationship, and you've experienced my presence. Are there 2 or 3 things that you think my being aware of would be really helpful in creating better relationships in the future? Now, that can be a scary question to ask, because if the person's resentful, they'll be like, the response may be cruel. They may cut you down. Well, you're just selfish. As opposed to, I find sometimes you focus more on what you want and not enough on what the other person wants. And so you want to be able to, if we could have the practice at the end of a relationship, 2 or 3 things that you think I'd benefit from being aware of that you experience, so that you can take them into consideration as you move on. That's a beautiful way to end a relationship. And then in terms of end of life, now I'm not an expert in this area. I've only just begun to do some work around end of life. And so there are people that are experts. There are death doulas. There are people that work around transitioning. What I would say is, are there things that you need to put to rest, or your final rites, unresolved things that you can somehow resolve in your life? Compassion and forgiveness are the energies behind those. I see why I did what I did. I see why that person did what they did. I allow that to put that to rest. Anywhere possible that you can take responsibility for yourself and your life, that's wonderful. And anywhere you can devote yourself to creating a legacy, whether through your prayers or through what you leave, those can be really helpful as well. So those are the main points that I've had for tonight for transitions, or how to move on with minimal residue. What's it like for you? Are you able to move on without residue? Do you find that situations repeat themselves in your life? Do you find yourself looking back and regretting? Or do you feel at peace in the things that you move on? Do you receive the energetic potential? I hope this conversation's been helpful, and have a wonderful evening.